October 8th meeting of the City of Tampa Variance Review Board. My name is Gary Brown, and I am the chairman this evening. From my left, the members of the board are
Michael Villa,
Samantha Walker,
Brett Feldman.
Lynn Hertak.
also in attendance this evening are Jared Simpson, Assistant City Attorney, Tawanda Anthony, and Eileen Rosario Ducksworth of Land Development Coordination, and Brian Knox is here of Natural Resources, and no one from Transportation. I'll take just a few minutes to review tonight's procedures. Cases will be called in the order that they appear on the agenda. When your case number and the applicant's name are called, please stand in either aisle to the side of the room to acknowledge that you are here. Staff will then give a brief introduction to the board of each application. When you approach the podium, please speak into the microphone and state your name, address, and if you have been sworn in. The applicant and/or their agent will have 10 minutes to give testimony, present witnesses, and documentation as a part of their presentation. This is your time to present all of your evidence. Anyone in the audience wishing to speak in support of or in opposition to the application will then have 3 minutes each. After that, the board may have an opportunity to ask questions regarding the application. Finally, the applicant will have an additional 5 minutes for a rebuttal if needed. The time periods as stated will be kept by the chair. Any information such as pictures or plans that have not been previously submitted as a part of your petition and you intend to present at this hearing for consideration in support of your petition must be individually presented and accepted by the board. After acceptance by the board, you must submit the item to staff for it to be entered and made a part of the permanent record. The board bases its decision on competent and substantial evidence, which is presented this evening, and which meets the criteria required by the city's Code of Ordinances. The variance granted by the board will be only for what is shown on the site plan and will be compliant with any terms and conditions stated in the approval by the board. You must have 4 votes for the variance to be approved. If an insufficient vote is obtained, the case shall be automatically carried over for consideration at the board's next meeting. If approved, your variance will expire 2 years from today's date. All other city codes will need to be met. However, if there are only 5 board members present, as is the case tonight, then only 3 votes are needed to deny an application. So your application needs 4 votes tonight to be approved, but it can be denied with only 3 negative votes. If your case is continued, it will be continued to either November 12th or December 10th, public hearing dates. Are we open on those dates? Are we okay on those dates? Or possibly pushed to January?
November's fine, December is pretty full.
Okay, all right. If you wish to appeal the Variance Review Board's decision to City Council, you must file a petition for review of a board decision within 10 business days of the decision. If your variance is granted, you will not be able to pull any permits until after the 10-day appeal period has passed. Your cooperation will ensure that this meeting runs smoothly, and it will be greatly appreciated. Before we begin the first case, is there any business regarding the agenda that staff would like to address?
Mr. Chair, if I may, at this time I'd like to ask the members of the board if they've had any ex parte communications regarding any of the matters that are coming before the board this evening, and that would include verbal or written conversations regarding any of the cases. Seeing and hearing none. I would add, are there any conflicts of interest or potential conflicts of interest for any of the cases coming before the board this evening? Seeing and hearing none, Mr. Chairman. If I also may add to that, I was informed by CTTV that we are closed captioning these meetings tonight, and I was requested to announce to everyone to please make sure that you speak into the microphone so that they can accurately get a closed caption of the meeting tonight, and that goes for the participants out there as well as the board, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I guess, and also I'd like to bring up the opportunity for next month to have a workshop prior to the board. If the board members are okay with that, I'm suggesting come in at 6, and we'd hold about a 20-minute workshop on legalese and procedural matters. Is that something we need to make a motion on? Or?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think a motion would be in order. If it's the pleasure of the board, I'd be honored to present to you
Okay.
on some general issues and brush up for some of the older folks and give it a little bit more to some of the newer folks.
All right, do I have a motion?
Legal workshop in advance of the next month's meeting. Do we want to have a specific time to start?
Six
PM.
Okay, got a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Veer, all in favor say aye. Aye. Okay. We did the ex parte, so at this time, all persons who will be presenting evidence or testimony to the board shall rise and be sworn in. If you're going to speak tonight, please stand up.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. I do this. Have a seat.
I'm sorry, before we get started, we need to approve the minutes from the past 2 months. Do I have a motion to approve the August minutes?
Mr. Chair, I will make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve the office minutes.
Okay, got a motion, second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, last month's September minutes?
Mr. Chair, I will make a motion to approve the September minutes, but I did want to note one change that I noticed, which is that in the roll call, Ms. Hurtak is not listed in attendance, and so we'll just need to make that one little change.
All right, that's duly noted. So, got a motion for approval, second?
Second.
All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, we're done with that. All right, now we can get started, staff.
Good evening, Board. Tawanda Anthony, Land Development. Our first case tonight is application number VRB 1918. The property address is 3101 West Prospect Road. The applicant is Paul Quinn. The summary is as follows. The applicant is seeking to reduce the west side yard setback from 5 feet to 3 feet for a pool enclosure. The property is zoned RS60 and was constructed in 1980. The applicant purchased the house in 2012. A tree consultation was conducted by staff in April of 2019. Here's an aerial of the site. Here's the subject property. And you can see this area is all RS60, and here's RS100 zoning. Here's a view of the property facing the front. Here's a view facing west. And here's a view facing east. And this is a site plan showing the proposed addition. So there's an existing pool enclosure, and they're just asking to extend it from 5 feet to 3 feet. Are there any questions for staff? Okay, thank you.
Sworn in. You'll have 10 minutes for your presentation.
Okay. Yes, I've been sworn in. Paul Quinn, 3101 West Prospect Road. And as the lady had stated, I'm seeking a side setback from 5 to 3 feet. And if you can see that, there we go. You can see it a little bit better in the color. I have an existing screened enclosure, so I just want to move it a little closer to the west as to where it is now. I don't know if this is, it's a little hard to see, but on here is the It's already towards the back. There's a pool house back there. It jets out already about, I guess, 8 feet. So really, I just want to continue it all the way down this line here. And I've got, is it? Oh. That better? Yeah. Okay. All right, let me get a pen so it's a little hard to see, but there's the existing screened enclosure, and I just want to run it down to right there. I've got a letter from my neighbor to the west stating he's, is that right? It does sound okay. The neighbor to the west, Truett Gardner, doesn't have any opposition to it. And the neighbor to the east, I got a letter from him too, J.H. Williams, that said has zero opposition as well.
I was handed a copy of the letter from Truett Gardner, and I passed
Okay.
those copies out.
Okay. Oh, that's really it. I mean, I'm just asking to, if there's any.
In order for the board to grant variances, there have to be hardships that are stated. Because you want to do something is not a hardship. So we kind of need to understand more as to why you need this.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You know, are there physical things
Yeah, there is,
about your property? You know, maybe why is it that you're doing it?
Can this,
That's upside down also.
okay. So the reason I want to do it is if you see there's, and on both sides, it has the same incumbents, so there's no room to put anything. It's just a narrow walkway. So if it gives me a little bit more room, one, to walk, you know, for safety issues if somebody's older, and two, just to have a little bit more room there. No, not at this time.
Okay. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on this application, either in favor or against? Okay, seeing none. Board, do you have any questions for the applicant and/or staff?
I have one. Mr. Quinn, I see that, I think you bought this house in 2012. Was this pool and enclosure already in place at that time, or did you
Yeah, it was
did you
existing.
do any of this already?
It was
so
existing.
So the prior owner obviously then did all of this work?
Correct.
Okay. All right, that was my question.
Mr. Feldman?
Mr. Quinn, did you have a prior variance that was approved by this board?
No, I came before the board a while back, and I was looking for a setback, and from 20 feet to 8, and there was not enough green space. So that's why you have.
Okay.
There was a mix-up, and they got it resolved this today about the 20 and 8-foot setback. That's the rear setback.
So did you, the application that we have contained, and maybe this is a question for staff, but the application that we have contains a hardship statement that is connected to a reduction in setback from 20 feet to 8 feet. Is there another hardship statement that you're aware of that was submitted regarding the change from, on the side from 5 to 3?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay.
They had, like, last night, they had the old one on there, and we got it resolved this morning around 11 o'clock.
I see. All right, let me see if I have.
It was changed, like, Eric Cotton had changed it from, he said, you don't have to resubmit.
Ms. Anthony, did you send that to us? Was that sent to us, or is that
To
perhaps we're
Wanda
just looking
Anthony
at the wrong?
Land Development. The revised site plan was sent, the site plan as well as the amended request was sent to you.
Okay,
And that should be in your updated staff report. In terms of an amended hardship criteria, that was not submitted by the applicant.
All right. Well,
I think this was noticed.
well, all right, so can we confirm that the 5 to 3 on the side was noticed?
Or it should be in the
Okay. All right, Mr. Quinn, can you just help us to understand, because again, there's no
It's more of a
hardship.
safety issue to walk by. It's, if you see how thin it was, that's all I have on either side. So it's more of a safety issue. I mean, if anybody was to come in crutches or a wheelchair or anything like that, they won't be able to get back to that area.
So if I'm understanding you, then what you're saying is that the pre-existing configuration of the pool leaves limited space around the side of the pool, and you need this, it's a practical difficulty for you to walk around that pool in the current configuration of the pool and the screen enclosure. Is that what you're
That's
saying?
correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other board questions? Okay, seeing none, you actually have 5 minutes more time if you want to take it.
That's all I really have.
Okay. You want to ask another question? Okay, well, we're going to ask you another question.
Okay. Yeah.
Especially since he hadn't
Yeah,
rebutted.
he hasn't really rebutted yet.
Assuming, if we were inclined to approve this request, would you agree that you would never put hard walls up where the screen enclosure is?
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Okay. Without objection, I'm going to close the public hearing and ask the board to make a motion and/or have a discussion.
So, it is a minor request. The applicant did not create this situation. The pool was existing at the time it was purchased. There are numerous letters that say that they don't have, from neighbors saying they don't have an issue with this. And it seems that there is a practical difficulty that has been asserted. So with that in mind, I'm inclined to support it, and we'll make a motion if there are no other comments or thoughts on the subject.
I'm not seeing any. Oh, excuse me.
I guess I'm having a hard time seeing, I mean, I sort of see the practical difficulty, but I also don't know how wide this enclosure, or when the enclosure is extended, how wide will that sidewalk or that pathway be, and will that be enough for someone in a wheelchair, or that's...
No, we've closed the public hearing, so
Okay.
you can't say anything. Was that a question?
No, it's a statement. I'm just saying that we don't seem to have that type of measurement available, so I don't know. I'm inclined to not.
Well, I think based on the photograph that was shown, there appeared to be approximately 2 to 3 feet of current space. He's requesting to move it 2 more feet from 5 to 3. So that would be somewhere between 4 and 5 feet by my estimation. And, you know, wheelchair access only requires about 32 to 36 inches through doorways, you know, so my assumption would be that would be more than adequate for something like a wheelchair to get by. I think that because it's such a minor ask, change, I don't think I'd have a difficulty in supporting it. Somebody want to make a motion?
If there are no other comments, I'll make a motion and we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
See where it goes from there. I move that the variance request for case VRB 19-18 for property located at 3101 West Prospect Road and a half be granted as depicted on the site plan presented at the public hearing for a reduction in the side yard setback from 5 feet to 3 feet with an encroachment of eaves and gutters based upon the applicant presenting competent and substantial evidence in the record and at this public hearing of an unnecessary hardship or practical difficulty when considering the 5 hardship criteria set forth in section 27-80 of the city code. And I will note that that is for an unenclosed screen enclosure, meaning that it can't be hard-walled. Conditioned upon that, yes. Specifically that there is practical difficulty based upon the existing pool and screen enclosure as they are situated, and that it was not the applicant who created this, and that there does appear to be a potential ADA request involved in this as well.
Okay, we have a motion for approval by Mr. Feldman. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Have a second by Mr. Villa. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that was a 5-0 approval. So you're approved.
Thank you.
All right, our next case is VRB 19-96 at 215 West Emily Street.
Tawanda Anthony Land Development. This is application number VRB 1996. The property address is 215 West Emily Street. The applicant is Myron Sales, and the agent is Willie McMillan. The request is as follows. Per section 27284.2.5, the applicant is seeking to remove a grand tree on the west side yard in order to build a single-family residence on a lot that is 40 by 100. The applicant is zoned RS50, the property is zoned RS50 and was purchased in 2019. The single-family residence was demolished in 2011. An active building permit was issued in June of 2019 for construction of a new single-family residence. Here's the aerial of the property. Here's the subject property. This area is zoned RS50. And you can see most of the areas are RS50. There's some CN, PD, and some multifamily on the outskirts. Here's a view facing the front of the property. Here's a view facing west, and you can see the tree. And here's a view facing east. And here's the site plan. And here's the tree in question to be removed. Natural Resources did find the request consistent with conditions and is here to provide additional information.
Brian Knox, Natural Resources. So as stated earlier, it's a grand tree that's proposed for removal. The grand tree is shown as 72 inches, but it's actually 40 inches. When we did the measurements, these measurements may have been done in circumference, and so that may be the difference. But when we went out to do the measurements ourselves with Natural Resources, it was 40 inches. The tree is rated B8, which means it's minor conditions and a fairly moderate tree that would be worthy of preservation. So the applicant is proposing to build a one-story residence on a 40-foot lot that's zoned RS50, and the proposed single-family residence is 26 feet wide. Natural Resources went out and we took some measurements based on those specs, and it was determined that it would be pretty improbable for them to build a single-family residence, even if it was one story, and try to preserve the tree. The tree is, as it stands, is currently 1 foot within the building footprint, and it's about 1 to 2 feet from the setback as well. The lot meets the criteria for the tree removal zone process. However, given that the grand tree was not in the tree removal zone, the variance review board was the option. If the board approves this variance, replacements based on canopy spread is required for the removal of the 40-inch grand tree with a mitigation of 18 2.5-inch caliper trees. Just to recap, here's a markup of the same site plan. It's the 40-inch grand tree live oak located right here. This tree was labeled as an oak. It's actually a cherry laurel. Natural Resources is available if there are questions.
I've got a question. Okay, so this is under the current code, not the past code.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So this is probably the first one the board's hearing. So we may need some help. Did I understand the permit has been given, or they're in for a permit?
They're
Building
in
permit.
for a permit at this time.
Okay, so they don't have a permit yet?
That's correct.
Okay, all right, and they've already gone through the process with staff, looking at whether they could move the house or not, or reconfigure. They've already been through that process, as you said, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and so you're at a point where you're advising them or telling them that their only other option is to come to the board?
That's correct.
Okay, all right. Any other questions?
Mr. Knox,
Yes, sir.
did you discuss alternative construction methods with the applicant? Are there any alternative construction methods that you believe could be utilized here in an effort to save the tree?
We did. We went out to the site to discuss possibly reducing the setbacks on the east side to shift the house over some. It just, given the root system, it wouldn't be enough if you combine the suspended flooring plus the height of the canopy as well. And so if the applicant chose to go up 2 stories, that would essentially eliminate everything on that side of the house. So, and that includes the limbs for the trees, and that includes a couple of other trees as well.
Thank you.
Do you know if the house that was torn down, it was a one-story house, right, that was torn down?
To my knowledge, yes, I did inquire about it, but they could probably testify better.
Yeah,
on whether
okay,
or not
we'll
it's a
ask them.
one-story
Do you
or
know if the house that was torn down was on a crawl space, raised on a crawl space, or a slab on grade?
I'm not sure.
You couldn't tell? Okay. All right, we'll ask the applicant.
All right.
Thank you. Applicant, please come forward, state your name, address, and if you've been sworn in.
Willie McMillan?
Were you sworn in earlier, Mr. McMillan?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, then we need to do that. If there's anybody else who's come in that is going to speak tonight and you haven't been sworn, please stand up and do so now.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, please state your name and address, and you'll have 10 minutes for your presentation.
Willie McMillan, address 4305 East Clifton, Tampa, Florida.
Okay?
Myron Sales, address 5610 Baywater Drive, Tampa, Florida.
Nola Thomas, address 4221 West Spruce Street, apartment 1416, Tampa, Florida.
Okay. Go ahead with your presentation.
It's pretty simple. Normally, the lots in the city of Tampa are RS 50, which is 50 foot wide, but this particular lot is only 40 feet. So we've tried with the architect 3 to 4 different times to see if we come up with an alternative, and this is the only plan that'll work on the vacant lot.
Okay. Do you want to add any more? You have more time if you need it. Anything else that you can add?
That's pretty much it.
Okay. All right. Is there anybody in the audience that wants to speak on this application, either in favor or against? All right. Seeing none, board, do you have any questions for the applicant and/or staff?
I'm curious why there wasn't a consideration for, like, say, a cutout area to preserve the tree. Just a little, because we were talking about the possibility of a raised foundation. So if it were, a floating foundation, I'm not positive on the terminology. And there could be a little cutout for the trunk of the tree. I'm just not seeing how it has to be a rectangle.
Mr. Chairman, can I address that?
Sure.
So under the new code, I provided all the board members with with the factors that are listed for tree removal considerations by the board, and one of the factors, and I believe this is the one that you're referring to, Commissioner Hurtak, is factor B, which talks about whether a structure can be reasonably reconfigured in order to preserve the grand tree. On another, reasonable reconfiguration is a term that is defined in the code, and I provided that for you on a separate sheet. And if you see, you can see there that when council passed this reasonable reconfiguration, they limited when that would apply, so as not to allow the city to force people to redesign. There are certain manners that are considered reasonable reconfiguration by the city, and just want to draw your attention to it's 5(2) sub 3, where it says that the internal flow or function of the structure is not adversely altered by the reconfiguration. So if it's the board's position that they should consider that, then the applicant should be allowed to present on whether or not having a cutout or some type of unusual accommodation for the tree would affect the internal flow or function of the structure, or would it change the number of stories, or would it adjust more than allowed by design exception as it's stated there. So those are the factors for reasonable reconfiguration, so I just want to draw those to your attention.
Thank you. Yes, so I guess I'm curious if maybe a combination of setback changes and possible cutout reconfiguration would adversely affect. I can't quite tell where the tree is in relation to the floor plan with the actual rooms in it, so I can't quite tell.
Staff, could you maybe put the floor plan up on the projector and maybe they could try to locate approximately where the tree would be located?
I have one for you if you want to take a look at it.
Okay, if you can put it on the overhead. Okay. Maybe you can get it on the overhead. That way we can all look at it.
Yeah, that's not the floor plan.
Yeah, well, yeah, it is.
No, but that's what I'm saying. I wanted to know where
Oh,
on the floor
okay.
plan.
Well, I think we can ask questions to get it located.
So this zooms out, and then that zooms in.
Mhm.
And then you can see it there if you want to,
Oh.
if you need to move it around.
Okay.
So, Mr. McMillan, the question is, we're wanting to understand what's on the site plan and how it relates to the floor plan.
Right.
The tree on the site plan is behind the carport, but we can't tell how many feet behind the carport. We did hear testimony from Mr. Knox that the trunk, per this site plan, is a foot into the building envelope already.
Correct.
Okay, so can you tell us maybe how far
Well,
behind the carport the tree is, approximately?
The setback from the property line is 7 feet. So prior was Dave Riley. Me and Dave Riley met to the property a while back, and he told me that pretty much if you dig a footer, your foot is going to probably hit the roots of that grand tree.
Okay, maybe if we could get the floor plan up there? Okay, maybe you can get the two side by side even. If you could put the site plan over the electrical plan, or the floor plan next to the site plan. I don't know if they're the same scale.
No,
They
one
may
is
not be. Yeah, they're not the same scale, but could you maybe point to the floor plan about where the tree is on the floor plan? There you go. Good job. So about where would the tree be on that floor plan?
tree would be about right here, in between the bathroom and one of the bedrooms.
Okay. Staff, do you think that's close, or can you tell? On the site plan, it looks to be a little bit closer to the carport.
Yes, it looks like it's only a few feet, but I can't tell if it's part of the laundry room or that bedroom, or even the bathroom.
Okay.
Well, no, that's the cherry lower. No, it's gonna be right here between bedroom number 2 and the bathroom.
And the bathroom, okay.
Correct.
Okay, and Mr. Knox, if that tree were to be preserved with the new structure being built around it, how far away would it need to be? Minimum
There would need to be a minimum required protected radius of 20 feet.
of 20 feet.
Yeah.
Well, the house is only 26.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna say that out. So yeah, it's a minimum required protected radius of 20 feet. That's the standard. We do relax that on occasions when we know that the roots are 2 inches or less in diameter, and we know that we can sever the roots at that time and they can regenerate. And so if there was an opportunity to explore that option, that would be something to consider. However, in this case, looking at the proximity of the tree in relation to where the house is being built, we're looking at roughly about the entire structure of the house in terms of trying to exercise that. So we felt that was unreasonable, and we didn't want the applicant to go through the unneeded expense.
Okay, so the testimony is it would cut the house in half, almost.
Effective.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I think we answered those. Anybody else have any other questions of staff for the applicant? Okay. Seeing none, you have 5 more minutes if you think you need it. Otherwise, we'll close the public hearing. Do you have anything else you want to add, or?
Nah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. All right, I'll move to close the public hearing and ask the board to make a motion, followed by discussion.
Chairman?
Yes?
Well, I think it's been made quite clear that it's rather impractical to expect to build a home on this, considering the fact that according to Natural Resources, we're looking at a 20-foot radius around this tree, which is practically almost in the buildable footprint of a house in any which way you try to figure it out. So I would be certainly inclined to believe that this is an adequate situation for the variance.
Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add? I would concur with that. I think that this is a situation where the home site is, even though it's RS50, as we heard, it's only 40 feet wide. They are respecting the side yard setbacks, and they've really designed, someone has designed a very nice home that looks like it would flow well and function well and be an asset to the neighborhood. So I would be inclined to approve it. So if somebody would like to make a motion.
All right, I'll give it a shot with our new script for this and the new rules under the new code. So I'd like to move the variance request for case VRB 19-96 for property located at 215 West Emily Street in Tampa, depicted on the site plan presented at the public hearing for removal of a grand tree based upon the petitioner meeting the burden of proof with regard to the 6 factors for determining tree removal as set forth in section 27-284.2.5 F4 of the City Code of Tampa for granting tree removal, specifically that the evidence provided in the record showed that the impact of the proposed building and structure on the buildable area, is quite significant, particularly in light of the fact that we're looking at a 40-foot wide lot. So it's smaller than most of the lots, I'm sure, in the city that are RS50. And in the case of our standards of review, also in section B, whether the proposed structure can be reasonably configured as defined by the table 284.2.5 to preserve the tree. According to Natural Resources, the agency and the applicant have discussed a number of plans, a number of configurations, and given the narrowness of this lot, given the fact that we have a 26-foot house, the tree is nearly in the center as far as the depth of the lot, that it's very impractical to expect a home to be built there.
Okay, we have a motion for approval by Mr. Villa. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a second by Ms. Hurtak. Is there any more board discussion? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None. You've been approved 5-0. Okay, our next case, VRB 19-97.
Tawanda Anthony Land Development. This is application number VRB 1997. The property address is 3411 West Bay Avenue. The applicant is Maureen Patrick and Bill Ledford. The agent is Maureen Patrick. The summary is as follows. For section 27-290, the applicant is seeking to increase the maximum height for an accessory structure from 15 feet to 18 feet. The applicant is seeking to construct a new 200 square foot accessory structure. The property is zoned RS60 and was purchased in 2013. The existing single-family residence was built in 1925. Here's the aerial of the site. Here's the subject property. Here's RS 50, a couple of houses down, and most of the area, as you see, is RS 60. Here's a view facing the front of the property. Here's another view facing the front. Here's a view facing west. A view facing east. And this is a copy of the site plan, and here's the proposed structure in the rear of the property. Are there any questions for staff? Okay, thank you.
The applicant, please come forward, state your name, address, and if you've been sworn in.
My name is Bill Ledford, and yes, I've been sworn in. I'm before you today to ask for a variance for our special circumstance on this project. We have a 200 square foot structure that we'd like to build, and due to the history of this property and the slope that it has, we're under a little bit of stress on how to get this structure to fit on there with the height requirement that the county has, or the city has. So we're proposing to add an extra 3 feet that would put the finished floor height at the city's recommended height.
Got a bunch of people that don't want to speak tonight. Do you have any other hardships? Can you tell us a little bit about the structure?
The particular hardship in this case is that due to the age of the house and how old it is, the actual property slopes to the alleyway in the back, and most construction around the area actually, the water runs off to the street. So this house, the actual property is almost 2 feet lower in the back than it is from the street. And there is a regulated finished floor height for new construction in this area. So to get to that finished floor height, we would have to put basically a floating footer above the grade to get to the height that's required. And it's approximately 3 feet. That's why we're asking for that, basically an extra 3 feet to get where we need to be. Because we can't bring in fill, I guess that's not allowed anymore. So we're going to keep the grade the same, just build the house up.
Do you have any plans on the proposed structure that you could show us?
Yeah, we do, yeah. That one might be a little too, pull out another one that's a little smaller. Okay, so this is the main house right here, and this little line is a walkway that goes from the front to the back. This is the new structure we plan on building. It's 200 square foot. And on the height, as far as what the heights are, the main road here is approximately 14.5 feet from sea level, and the back of the property is about 12.5 feet from sea level.
Do you have anything else you want to add?
I think that's it.
Okay, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on or against this application? Seeing none, board, do you have any questions for the applicant and or staff? Mr. Feldman?
Just for the record and for my edification, walk me through the basis of the height. You got 2 feet that you're going to build up, or 3 feet you're going to build up off the ground to put the finished floor height on.
Correct. The finished floor of the structure will be approximately 3 feet from the existing grade that they have there now.
Then, what, you got 10-foot ceilings inside? Is it single story or
It's a
2
single
story?
story, yeah. It does have a storage loft in it, so the structure height is just over 15 feet.
Okay, so that includes going up to the
So
tip
the
of
top,
the roof?
the very top, yeah, the peak.
Okay, and the roof it's a gable roof?
It's like a barn type shape,
Okay,
the structure itself.
all right. And so, you said there's a storage loft inside?
There is a storage loft, there is, yes.
Well, so what is the purpose of this structure?
The structure
200-foot
itself,
structure?
the homeowner's gonna use it as, she's a writer, so she's gonna use it like a little art studio.
Okay, so it's not a storage,
She
and of
will
itself.
also use it for storage, yes.
okay. All right, thank you.
And if I could add, I put this map up here. There are several other properties in the area within 300 feet that have structures that are above the 15-foot threshold. I'm not sure if they have variances or not for theirs, but there were quite a few in the area. This is that same map provided, and each one of these arrows represents additional structures on a property that are above 15 feet.
Okay, my question regarding that, is the 15 feet generated or required because of FEMA, or is it required for some other city code that you're aware of?
The 15 feet is the maximum structure.
No, excuse me, the floor elevation.
Oh, yeah.
You said the front of the lot was about 14 and a half feet?
Yeah, from the street, yeah.
Okay. Well, above sea level.
Right, that's what this, on the survey, yeah,
Right.
14 and a half.
So
yeah.
what's driving the height of the floor on the proposed accessory
The
building?
building code requires that the finished floor height in that structure be 18 inches above the front street.
The front street.
Right, so
Okay.
that happens to be the very highest point, and because
Okay.
the property slopes, it kind
All
of
right,
brings it up off.
that was the connection we weren't hearing, so
Okay,
thank
sorry
you for
about that.
clarifying that. Okay. So again, your hardship is the lot slopes,
Right.
unlike most lots that drain to the street, this one
This
slopes
one actually
away.
slopes to the back, correct.
And the back, there is an alleyway?
It's an unimproved alley, so it's just grass now. It's not really meant to retain water, but it's unimproved, so that's just where the water goes. And it happens to, most of the water goes through her property to get to it, because most of the other houses are fairly new.
Okay, all right. Any other questions, board?
So you said that the finished structure was going to be just over 15 feet?
Well, from the grade, it'll be at 18 feet,
Okay.
yeah.
Which puts it at about 15 feet from floor to top or roof.
Correct, right. From the finished floor to the top, yes.
Right, which is
Is just over,
customarily allowed by code, but the
Correct.
code measures, the code measures from grade and not from the floor. Right, okay.
all right. It's kind of unique in that point. You think of it, just go with the finished floor height that's regulated already, and say from there up would be X number of feet. But, yeah.
Okay. Is there any reason why you didn't consider a flat roof to bring it down to 3 feet?
Just for architectural reasons, she had her mind set on a certain design, and it's consistent with the neighboring properties that have that same design on their lots. She could have went with a flat roof, but it would have altered the look of the neighboring properties, because most of the ones around it have that exact same look that she's going with.
Okay, and this property backs up to 1, 2, 3 dwellings? What's the situation with the neighbors to the rear? Were there conversations with those neighbors?
There was no conversations. Everybody got mailed, their mailers, standard mailers with my name and address, and if they had any issues to give a call, or be here tonight, and nobody showed up.
Called you?
Nobody called.
Nobody wanted to talk to
Nobody
you?
emailed me, no, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, board? You have 5 minutes for a rebuttal, if you need it.
Well, do you guys have any more questions for me
No,
about?
we're done. We're asking you
Okay,
now.
well, we did do our best to try to, make it work, but being that that property is pretty old, it was built in the 20s, so there's not a whole lot that we can do with it. We can't bring the grade up to match the neighboring property, so it just has to kind of be what it is. So this new structure will just kind of match the existing house that she has now, same type of siding and same type of flooring. The floor system that's raised basically off of piers, so there'll be like a crawl space underneath it. And that's about it.
All righty. I'll move to close the public hearing and ask the board for a motion followed by discussion.
So this seems right in line with what we are supposed to do here. This is a unique situation where we have, I don't say unique, but it's a rare situation where you have a property that's sloping to the back, and the condition of the property itself is causing the request for the variance, and without this request for the variance, they're being denied something that others in this neighborhood and with similar properties would have by right, which is a right to build the accessory structure, which is not a big accessory structure, up to 15 feet. So unless anyone has any thoughts to the contrary, I'll go ahead and make a motion on that.
I would just add that by right, they could build an accessory structure because he's RS60 up to 900 feet. And this is 200 feet.
Yeah.
So I would add that that's one of the factors that we might consider.
Understood.
Okay, so yeah, if you want to make a motion, please do.
All right, well, then I will move that the variance request for case VRB 19-97 for property located at 3411 West Bay Avenue be granted as depicted on the site plan presented at the public hearing to increase the allowable height of an accessory dwelling from 15 feet to 18 feet with an encroachment of easements and gutters, which, based upon the applicant presenting competent and substantial evidence in the record in this public hearing of an unnecessary hardship or practical difficulty when considering the 5 hardship criteria set forth in section 27-80 of the city code, specifically that the existing home, it was built in 1925, the slope of the property drains toward the back. City code requires that the finished floor height be 18 inches above the front grade, and with the slope, that means that the structure, which is only 200 feet and could be built up to 900 feet, but the applicant is choosing to build only 200, would lose about 3 feet in height. In order to allow them to build up to where they would be otherwise allowable, they would require this variance.
All right, we have a motion for approval by Mr. Feldman. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Mr. Villa. Any board discussion? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Been approved 5-0.
Thank you.
Next case, VRB 19-98 at 198 Blanca Avenue.
Tawanda Anthony Land Development, this is application number VRB 1998. The property address is 198 Blanca Avenue. The applicants are Carolyn Kamen, Cooper Johnson of Smith Architects. And the agent here tonight is Stephen Allison. First, section 27290, the request is as follows. The applicant is seeking to reduce the building separation from 10 feet to 6 inches between the principal structure and the accessory structure. The applicant is seeking to construct a new aluminum pergola in the rear yard. The property is zoned RS75 and was purchased in 2016. The existing single-family residence was constructed in 1989. This is the aerial of the property. Here's the subject property. This area is all zoned RS75. There's a site plan of the front of the property. Here's a photo facing west. Here's a photo facing east. You can zoom in some. And here's the site plan. This is the existing house, the existing structure, and here's the proposed pergola, and this is the building separation request to the 6 inches. If they were to comply with code, this would be the 10-foot separation. Would be here.
Is the 10-foot a requirement of RS-75? Because
Correct.
I know that we've had 5-foot. So
Yes,
they
for
were-
RS-50 and RS-60 is 5 foot and above.
And then it goes up.
Starting at RS-75, it's
Okay.
10 feet.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for staff? Nope. Will the applicant please come forward, state your name, address, and if you've been sworn in?
Good evening, board members. My name is Steve Allison, 14217 Shadow Moss Lane, Tampa. I have been sworn.
Good evening.
And I'm Carolina Kamen, 11164 Keystone Tavern Lane, Riverview, Florida, and I have been sworn in. I'm just going to sit back.
Good evening. You have 10 minutes.
Okay, board members, this whole case is about a guy who wants to provide some rear yard shade by erecting an unobtrusive pergola. I had to look up what that was when I started, but adjacent to his home. In effect, it's a covered patio. It's not exactly an outlandish sort of request. This is not a case of a prominent person attempting to exploit or undermine rules. Rather, this is simply a matter of exercising his legitimate property rights to enhance the livability of his residence. And as will be demonstrated, approval of the variance is the most sensitive and appropriate manner to realize his totally reasonable development objectives. I have submitted into the record responses to the 5 criteria contained in the zoning code. I'm not going to read through those here, but I will offer some supplemental comments for emphasis on each one of them. The first matter, I don't know how clear that is. In terms of physical features of the property, looking through this immediate neighborhood, this property has the narrowest street frontage of any of the neighboring properties. That had a profound impact on the design choices for the house. And with that narrow and cone-shaped lot, it basically dictated that to construct a home commensurate with development trends in that neighborhood, there was going to be a considerable amount of lot coverage that precluded the provision of a large rear yard that might accommodate accessory structures. I think there's another aspect of this case that makes the request unique and singular, and I will get to that basically in my summary comments. The second criteria has to do with practical difficulty resulting from actions of the applicant. Essentially, that's a question about, is this a self-imposed hardship? It is not. He is seeking to go through normal channels to have a variance approved. This is not an after-the-fact situation He's going through all proper channels. And I would note that an effective zoning ordinance cannot be fully rigid. Provision must be made for reasonable development alternatives that may not fully comply with the letter of the ordinance, but comply with its spirit. And I think the variance process is one such means for that type of flexibility. The variance, if granted, will not interfere with the or injured the health, safety, or welfare of others whose property would be affected. There's zero impact on health, safety, and welfare. I acknowledge that I understand there's concern by at least one neighborhood about how this might affect their views. That's not specifically a part of that criteria, but I understand its sensitivity, and we'll address it in a couple of ways. This is a rendering of the pergola itself. I'm sorry. That's a little more legible.
Thank you.
This is the proposed pergola itself. Again, that's not a terribly obtrusive type of thing. Certainly doesn't in any way limit access to light and air for adjoining properties, and does very little to limit views of Tampa Bay for surrounding properties. I would note that fully within the legal rights of the applicant, if this variance were denied, the guy wants to have some shade in his backyard. You know, again, not a terribly unusual thing. What could be done alternatively would be to erect some sort of awning or standalone umbrella type feature. As depicted here, that's of a size and scale that would not be unusual. Most of those are able to be tilted. Given the northerly orientation of the rear yard, this would likely be tilted to the west, and that would considerably inhibit the view from adjoining properties, significantly more so than the proposed variance or the proposed pergola. And again, this is an alternative that is fully allowed by code. It's not regulated by zoning code. Fourth criteria is...
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd ask that CTTV put the overhead projector up on the television for us.
I'm sorry?
The picture that you placed onto the, thank you. That was all I was
okay.
requesting. Thank you.
Oh.
I'm sorry, it was in front of us. I'm sorry, yeah, okay.
Oh, okay. In terms of harmony with and serving the intent and purpose of the zoning code and comp plan, in my narrative, I highlighted multiple provisions of the intent statement of the zoning code that I think are fully implemented by this proposal. Beyond the specifically cited text of the code, it is clear that both the comp plan and zoning code support quality development that is consistent and compatible with its surroundings. And as a certified professional planner with more than 30 years of experience, I can attest that it's fundamentally clear to me that this proposal is fully appropriate, compatible, and consistent with applicable provisions of the comp plan and zoning code. Final criteria is that allowing the variance will result in substantial justice. considering both the public benefits that would be secured by enforcement of the regulation relative to the hardships that would be endured by the property owner otherwise. And I think this is really the essence of this case. The pergola has both functional and aesthetic purposes, primarily functional, although it is architecturally designed to complement the principal structure on the house. But it allows the property owner greater enjoyment of his home by providing shade and protection from adverse weather conditions. Its placement adjacent to the home is not simply a matter of the not meeting the required building separation. This is a patio with a cover. You put patios with a cover adjacent to your house. You don't separate it and have to walk through the sun to get to your covered patio. This is where it would normally go. I actually think that the zoning code errs in not distinguishing accessory structures from accessory buildings. If I think of an accessory building in a rear yard, I think of a shed. A shed contains things like lawnmowers and yard equipment and gasoline. We had a discussion with city staff early on. We asked them what the purpose of this building separation was. They said it was fire safety. They don't want something starting there that could then spread to adjacent structures.
Can you wrap up in a minute?
Okay, I'm going as fast as I can. This structure is to be comprised exclusively of non-flammable materials, and we would accept a condition from this board to enforce that. So that public purpose is irrelevant to what's being done here. There are, again, this is not an unreasonable desire. It's fully typical in this neighborhood. There are multiple similar structures in the rear yards of houses up and around all over this particular area. Regarding the singularity of this thing, I think it becomes singular and unique when you have a situation where enforcement of the regulation literally provides a solution that a solution to something that isn't a problem. It's not a fire hazard. And by contrast, you doing this instead actually undermines the use and enjoyment of the neighboring property by having a more obtrusive physical blockade for their access to views of the bay.
Okay, Mr. Allison, I'm going to cut you off right here. You'll have an opportunity for rebuttal and whatnot.
Thank you very much.
I need to ask, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on or against this application? If so, please come forward, state your name, address, if you've been sworn in, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Pamela Jo Hatley, 14517 North 18th Street, Tampa, Florida. I represent Jeffrey and Terry Willis, who own the property next door to this property at 196 Blanca. I believe staff indicated this house was built in 1989. That's actually not correct. The house was built, this applicant purchased the property in 2016, and the house has been built since then. I'd like to first touch on some Florida law. Under Florida Supreme Court case, the enforcement of a legitimate zoning ordinance is in the public interest. The necessity of, in order to get an ordinance, in order to get a variance, an applicant must show that hardship exists, and the hardship cannot be shown unless it is found that there is no reasonable use that can be made of the property without the variance. A self-created hardship cannot constitute a basis for a variance. And an applicant who seeks a zoning variance must demonstrate the hardship and that reasonable use of the property can't be made otherwise.
That's upside
Do
down.
y'all see that?
That's upside down. Can you
Okay.
turn it around?
They get to see it, it's not showing up on the.
This is the applicant's building permit that was submitted to the city in 2016. This is a footprint of the structure that existed before this residence was constructed. This is the footprint of the existing residence. The applicant has designed and constructed a residence of over 7,000 square feet. In his original design, he did not leave space to put this pergola, and now he wants to go back and add it. That does not constitute a hardship. What the applicant has demonstrated here is that reasonable use of this property can be made because he has constructed a house there that is perfectly usable the way it is. Now, the applicant talked about physical characteristics of the site under variance criteria number 1. This is the plat where this property is located. This is the property. These circles indicate areas where there are similar pie-shaped parcels, very similar to this applicant's property. And I'd like to address the hardship criteria. The applicant argued...
You've got about 10 seconds.
Oh my God, 3 minutes. Okay. The applicant has not demonstrated a hardship. The applicant has constructed a parcel, a house on a parcel that is too big to add this pergola and now wants to go back and do it. So that is not a hardship. It is a self-imposed hardship, and that under Florida law cannot support a variance. So I'm going to submit into the record the court cases that I cited, this plat, and some photographs.
Okay, thank you very much. State your name, address, and if you've been sworn.
My name is Jeff Willis. I live at 196 Blanca Avenue.
Okay.
And
you have
I
been
have
sworn?
been sworn.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Willis.
We live next door to Frank and Jackie, and of course, we wanted them to, have enjoyment of their home, but they have pushed the envelope pretty much at every avenue, and it's a 7,200 square foot home that has literally been shoehorned in. There is no room for anything else. They're now claiming a hardship that they have created, and we would ask that this is kind of indicative of somebody trying to get something that they've created a problem for. If he hadn't created the problem, he wouldn't be here asking you folks for a pergola. I'm sure that he spent considerable time and money to build his home, design his home. As a matter of fact, the CO was issued just a few months ago, and they were living on the property prior to that. And so if there were questions of things that needed to be done, like a pergola or an outdoor shower or whatever he wanted, that could have been addressed at that time. It was not. And so now he's coming before you saying, I have a hardship. I want to be able to sit on my pool deck and be able to control the sun. And we're saying enough is enough. He's got the plan, if you look at it, calls for a 200 square foot pergola. It also has some mechanical device to control the roof or covering, which will seal it. In the past, we've noticed that he has hung, I guess you call it screens, and these screens are being used for the upper portion of the house, and they completely block any sunlight or wind. And of course, we do get high winds there, and I'm sure that's why he put those in. I have no doubt that he may, at some point, want to enclose this pergola. Maybe he'll be back here before you or whoever the new group is that's on the VRB. But we would ask that at this point, with all the things that have been going on with this 7,200 square foot home, that we say no. That we say there is no real hardship other than the one you've created, and that we want you to enjoy your home, and we look forward to, a long time for you to do that. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Andrew Spicola. I have been sworn. I live at 192 Blanca Avenue, which is 2 doors over. I live next to the Willises. I'm here on behalf of myself, my wife, my 3 children. And in addition, I'm also here on behalf of my 2 elderly parents who live at 176 Baltic, which is approximately 5 houses down on the same street and on the same canal. And I'd like to reiterate several of the things that Mr. Willis said, but I know that my time is limited, so I won't do so. A couple of things that I want to point out. There are 2 cases that are going to be submitted into the record, the first of which is Thompson versus the Planning Commission of Jacksonville, which is a 1st District Court of Appeals case. The second is Bernard versus Palm Beach County, which is a 4th DCA case. And those stand for the proposition that you must demonstrate that there is no reasonable use of the property without the variance. Clearly, has been demonstrated by Mr. Willis, this is a brand new construction. It is a beautiful home. It is a very large home, and it is certainly able to be used without the addition of the pergola, which then goes to the point of a hardship. Is there a hardship? Well, I submit there is no hardship. There was, at the time that this property was purchased, several trees on the property that provided a great deal of shade, and those trees were removed in order to put in a 7,000 square foot house. And there was obviously a great deal of money and time that was used to design this home, and it certainly could have been a consideration at that time to include a porch within the footprint of this monstrosity that would not affect the setbacks or the regulations in the code. I have to disagree with my esteemed colleague that said that it complies with all the requirements of the code. In fact, the city's own building code specifically states that you cannot create a hardship and then come back and ask for a variance with regards to that hardship. And that is exactly what has occurred in this case. And I'd like to cite one other case. It's Auerbach versus the City of Miami. And basically what that case says is the law cannot and will not approve any government action adversely affecting the rights of others that is based on no more than the fact that those who support it have the power and the will to work their will. And that's exactly what's going on here. I know my colleague suggested that there wasn't going to be anything that was going to affect the neighbors, but I would disagree. It's certainly going to affect our view. It's going to affect our air movement, our wind, probably create additional heat. It very well could create a danger in the circumstance where we have a hurricane that comes through and it's in a structure that's not attached to the main building that certainly could fly off and land up in either my yard or Mr. Willis's yard. These are all things that he is asking for, that he has created for no more reason than just his own convenience. He would like to have shade. Now, I understand that, but that's certainly something that should have been designed into the original design of this home before it was built. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Terry Willis. I live at 196 Blanca Avenue. And what else do I need to tell you?
If you've been sworn in.
I have been sworn in.
Thank you.
And I'm very nervous, so y'all just hang in there.
Don't worry. We're not
Okay, now I think I can show this picture this way. Does that show? Or do you see it?
Yep, that's good.
Okay, great.
A+.
All right, I want you to see those beautiful palm trees in that backyard that have been planted in the past 6 months that actually are growing very quickly, and they will give a lot of shade in the backyard of 198 Blanca. So I want you to see that. So it's not as if they don't and haven't provided shade for themselves, which makes a lot of sense, and it's a lovely thing. The other thing I want you to see is in this picture, they have, if you see the front balcony, the balcony closest to the large shower, wood shower thing, that balcony is the same as the balconies that are blacked behind, because they have screens that they drop down over and block the balconies. It's a screen that comes down. I'm very concerned that if they put up a pergola, they will do the same thing and block that area.
They will drop them down, and there won't be any air movement through there. So I'm concerned about that, and since I have experienced other issues with that, I want you to know that that's something that you need to consider. The last thing is several times during the conversation or the statements from this gentleman here, he said something about they could do other things that would block our view or block the view or have an effect. And I would like to show you, we have experienced that with this is the height of the fence that we have next door to our home. We have a 4-foot wall. That fence goes up over our heads. We, if you can see, we actually had to beg them not to do it even higher than that, where it's here, that would go even higher. And on the other side of that, when they put in the pergola, it would actually go up another 2 feet above that. So you can imagine the height and the weight of that on that side of the house. It creates almost, my grandson asked me if we lived in jail. So I want you to be, please be aware of that. And I'm going to sit down. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak? No one else would like to speak on this? Okay, board, I'll open up for questions of the applicant and/or staff.
I have a question for staff.
Mr. Feldman has a question for staff.
Actually, for Mr. Simpson, for legal.
Okay.
Mr. Simpson, there was a
Yes.
statement that was made that the applicant can legally place a tent or an umbrella of some tent-like quality in the back without a permit or variance. Is that, to your knowledge, is that accurate?
I think that would be a good question for staff. I know that there are lesser restrictions for tents and temporary structures, but I'm not intimately familiar with them.
I appreciate that. Ms. Anthony, if you have any input on that, I'd appreciate it.
Tawanda Anthony, Land Development, if they were to put, and you are allowed to put tables and with the umbrellas on them, those would be allowed. But in terms of putting up something on a permanent basis, it would require a permit. So if it's temporary, it doesn't require a permit, but if they're putting up something that's permanent, then it would require a permit.
Do you know if the rear portion of the house next to where the proposed pergola is going, do you know what the actual setback is at that point? The rear yard setback?
It looks like it is 9.8 feet.
No, to the primary structure I meant.
Oh,
Excuse
to the
me.
primary structure?
Yeah.
So here it's 6 inches.
No. The existing primary structure, forget the pergola for a moment.
Okay.
How far, what's the distance to the rear property line? What is the
Well, this
existing
is the
distance?
25-foot setback requirement here.
That is the dotted line that's kind of arcing, okay, it says 20 foot,
Yes.
right,
So
okay.
you-
All right,
yeah,
so it
no.
appears that the top corner is at or very near the 20-foot setback. No, it says 20. Oh, well, it's 20 foot on RS 75. 20-foot rear isn't that the required or minimum?
So they're showing the 20-foot rear yard setback here.
Correct. Yeah, but my question is that is the minimum setback for RS 75,
Correct.
is 20 feet.
Correct.
Okay. And the rear yard setback for an accessory structure in RS 75 is what?
For a detached accessory structure, they're required 3 feet for the
3
rear
feet.
and the side.
3 feet. Okay. And so I'm looking at the proposed pergola that says 12 feet 4 inches at the top there. And then it appears there's approximately another maybe 7 feet to the seawall, or the property line, 7.6.
Correct.
So that's getting us close to the 20 feet, okay? So if they were to do and I'm not suggesting they do this because they have their reasons for designing what they designed, but they could do this pergola, shove it all the way out to the seawall, 3 feet from the seawall, and come back to within 10 feet of the primary structure legally, and not come here and ask for permission. Is that correct?
Tawanda Anthony Land Development, if they were able to meet the 10-foot building separation as well as the 3 feet on the side and the rear.
Okay, all right. I've got a question, and this may not, you may not be able to answer this next question. The Willis's neighbors showed us a photograph of what appears to be a retaining wall with a fence that was built along that property line. And it looked like the retaining wall was about 3 feet high. So the grade, my question is, the grade was legally raised in the rear yard about 3 feet or more, and they're allowed to do that, correct? I mean, that wasn't, because I know a lot of times people are concerned about pools being built in backyards in floodplain neighborhoods, and everybody would like to have the pool up, to the elevation that's close to the finished floor of the home. But the city came up with a code that says you can't have a pool more than about 12 inches or so out of the ground. So this was a legal remedy for this property owner to raise the backyard up and kind of circumvent the concern of neighbors, adjoining neighbors that have rear yards down at existing grades.
Correct, in regards to the fence, yes.
Okay, so it's all legal. The retaining wall was legal.
Well, I don't know the exact height, but.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
But I mean, we're hearing some of the concerns of the neighbors, and that was one of the ones that was mentioned. So I just wanted to verify with you that there's no code violation in what they did there.
Correct.
Okay. And if they were to attach a shade awning, a canvas type shade awning on the rear of the home, the primary structure, they can't do that because it would extend into the 20-foot rear setback? Are awnings governed by that same 20-foot setback?
They are. Tawanda Anthony Land Development, it would be. It would
Even
still have to meet
if they
code.
collapse and fold up against?
Well, if it's a temporary.
No, this would be permanent. My question is if
they're
they
going to
permanently
building permits
attach.
and it requires a permit, then it would have to meet code.
Would it not require a permit because of the setback, or?
Well, it would require a permit if it's a permanent structure that's going in. And
Okay.
then they would have to show that they can meet code.
Okay, so something
awning would require
something
permit.
like an attached awning would be governed by that same 20-foot setback?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Anybody else have any other questions? Mr. Feldman?
I do, but I feel I've been hogging it. So if anyone else has questions first,
Or Jack,
then
you wanna
please
go? Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No.
You first.
So when was this, I just want to clarify when the structure was built, the house.
Tawanda Anthony Land Development, I'll let the applicant answer that question.
I think the dates suggested by Ms. Hatley are correct. It was only recently occupied.
2016? Oh.
Yeah, just earlier this year.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. They purchased the
if I-
property in 2016 and built it in 2019. Okay,
If I
thank you.
could also on that awning question, this is my understanding, Tawanda, correct me if this is not consistent with yours. We can have 3-foot awnings on the house attached that don't require a permit. If we were to extend that, because they would then be permanently affixed to the house and extend more than 3 feet, a permit would be required for that. The situation that makes something an accessory structure by definition in the code is that it has a permanent place on the ground. It's permanently affixed in some way. What I was showing was types of umbrella that can be moved around, secured in a temporary fashion.
I do have one more question
Sure.
for you. What is the flooring currently, and what would it be if it's going to be different?
I'll ask our architect to answer that.
Carolina Kamen. Currently it's travertine, and when this structure, if it were to go in, it would be designed by an engineer, enlarged slab footers. It's Miami-Dade approved. It's stronger than the FBC requirement. It would not go anywhere in a hurricane. It's all approved. It's not just a dinky little metal thing placed and, flying away. It would be permanently attached into the ground, secured like any other structure.
So it's not replacing grass, was basically my
No,
question.
it's not placed in grass.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
And it would remain travertine underground, under there.
Mr. Feldman?
So I would have a question for some of the neighbors as a follow-up to some of the things that Mr. Brown pointed out. Do y'all understand what I don't know if there's a spokesperson for your neighborhood group, but do y'all understand that the point that Mr. Brown was making about how this structure could actually be moved closer to the edge of the property? It could go up to 3 feet legally without us doing anything. We could deny it tonight. They could move this out. If they could get a 10-foot separation between those pieces, they could actually move this out to the edge and build it, which I would assume would be more intrusive into your views, more intrusive into the, and so my question is simply, if we were to deny this and they were to do something like that, is that what you would want to do? Or is there some compromise that you would be willing to?
In answer to that question, I would say this board cannot grant a variance unless a hardship has been demonstrated by the applicant. And if that structure can be set away from the house 10 feet like the code requires, and there is space to put it there, then that demonstrates there is no hardship to move it up 9.5 feet and make it 6 feet away from the house. This board needs to remember the authority that was granted to it is only to grant a variance if those 5 criteria show a hardship. And if that is the case, then that demonstrates there is no hardship because the structure can be put where it's supposed to be under the code. And so yes, in answer to the question, certainly. Like the Florida Supreme Court said, legitimate zoning ordinances are in the public interest and enforcement of them is in the public interest, and certainly we would prefer that. Thank you.
If I may, just as one of the neighbors. Again, Andrew Spicola, I'm 2 houses over. I think to your point, Mr. Chairman, the original design of, I don't have the drawing in front of me, but I think it was 12 feet 4 inches was the width of the pergola, and then there was a 7 foot 6 inch setback to the property line. So under the code, they can move it to 3 feet from the rear property line, and then they would still have to meet the 10 feet. So in essence, they're really going to have about a 5.5 foot wide pergola that would be sufficient or would fit. I think that would be less intrusive than a 12.5 foot pergola. In my opinion, I wouldn't prefer either as a neighbor.
Ms. Anthony, I hate to ask this question again, but based on what Mr. Allison said, he's stating that he thinks he can legally attach a 3-foot awning to the rear of the home and meet code. Do you agree with that?
Tawanda Anthony Land Development, I know there is a provision in the code where you're allowed 3 feet for decorative features, so that may be what he's referring to.
Okay. Okay. I think it's an important consideration going back to what the testimony was for one of the hardships of what they were trying to fix. So it's important for us, I think, to understand if that's a legal remedy or not. And I just don't want to have conflicting testimony. So you think you might be right?
Correct.
Okay. I know I had a follow-up question, and I went blank. I'll think of it in a second. Anybody else have a question? Oh, well, let me ask this. Mr. Allison, can you, on the overhead projector, and what we have in our package is not a very good drawing of the existing home. So I don't know if you have the same document, or better yet, do you have any photographs standing in the opposite corner of the property with your back to the seawall looking towards the rear of the home and the pergola?
I do not.
I mean, you did a beautiful computerized rendering from the Willis's yard. Would have loved to have seen the same thing from the applicant's backyard.
Yeah.
His own backyard.
I think, I thought that something to that effect was submitted.
That doesn't show the landscaping.
Okay.
That's the only other view I've got.
Okay, well, that helps.
That's
Thank
actually
you.
not a photograph, it's a rendering.
Oh, that's even better. Okay, so the space to the right of this on the ground floor, well, on both floors actually, are those outdoor covered spaces?
Yeah, they're porches.
Okay, and so there are 3 outdoor covered spaces in this rendering, 2 up and 1 down.
Yeah, completely covered. But
Okay.
the idea of the pergola is to get the sun filtered, to be able to control it and enjoy the
Correct.
open
Correct.
under the stars.
Yeah,
type
and this,
environment.
the rear of this home that needs to be shaded is facing where? What direction is it facing?
North.
It's facing north, okay. Hence the reason that in this rendering, the slats in the pergola are running in the direction that they're running.
Mhm.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay. Anybody else have any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, can I chime in on a few points? There were some legal issues raised, so I feel obligated to chime in on some of that.
It's your job.
Under the Thompson v. Planning Commission of City of Jacksonville case that was referred to earlier, it was held in that case when the owners were aware of the shape and size of the property that they purchased, and they still designed a building that was too large for the lot and left insufficient room for the code-required parking in that case. The court did determine that that was a self-created hardship in that particular case. As for the other statements that were made about the unnecessary hardship, the city code uses the term hardship, but it also uses the term practical difficulty. And while there isn't a case on point in Florida on this, McMillan in the Law of Municipal Corporations, which is a very influential treatise, discusses that the terms practical difficulty and unnecessary hardship are slightly different, with practical difficulty being a slightly lesser standard that can be applied to an area variance, which is a setback question. Now, to what degree slightly lesser, again, as I stated, there's not a case on point in Florida, but according to McMillan and the city code, the practical difficulty is arguably a slightly lesser standard. So I did want to put those 2 points onto the record. Hopefully that clears up a few things.
Can I say one thing about
Yes.
the screens that they were referring to? They are clear insect screens. They're shown solid black. They picked the right time of day to show it that way, but they are not like that. They're screens that roll down and roll up, motorized, and that was approved on our plans, permitted and everything. It was never an afterthought. And that would not be the case if this pergola were to be approved. That would never be part of the plan. We would take a condition that it would never be covered, anything like that. So,
Could you put that rendering back up that we had of the rear of the house? were you the architect on the home
I
itself?
was one of the architects, yes, sir.
Okay. What is this room that they're trying to shade? What is it?
The room behind it?
Yeah,
That's the dining room.
the dining room.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the
Floor,
kitchen right behind
it
it.
has floor-to-ceiling windows?
It does. Those are operable doors, bifolding doors.
Oh, they're
that
they're
open.
operable doors.
Yeah, they
Okay.
bifold to the side.
To maximize the view of the water and?
Yes, sir.
Is that,
Mhm.
okay. Was there any concern or consideration about sun or shade when that was originally designed?
In our drawings, we did have an awning that came out 3 feet, but it wasn't enough, and we didn't put that in. We
It
didn't
wasn't
build it.
enough.
It wasn't going to be enough shade, and then the outdoor use, you want to, once you build a house, you see that that's a nice space, you want it to be able to control the shade out there. And like I
Okay.
said, it's a different environment from the porches that are already there.
We have a new speaker. Is he allowed? Legal? We have someone that.
Are we- At what point in the hearing are we at?
We're
We're
in
still in the
the- we're
question
still in
and
question
answer.
and
It's the
answer,
pleasure
yeah.
of the board.
Yeah, that's
if you'd
fine.
like to
Sir,
hear.
you want to state your name and
Yes, my
address?
name is Frank Ripa, 198 Blanca.
Okay, and have you been sworn in, Mr. Reaper?
Yes, I was.
Okay,
Yes, the reason, when we originally designed the house, we had that 3-foot overhang, got permitted, and my wife and I decided, let's live there for a while and see what it was gonna be like. And that 3-foot overhang was not gonna do anything for the sun or for the drainage or for the rainwater coming down. And that's when we said, this isn't gonna be worth it. And that's when we said, let's look at a pergola in that area.
okay. I don't have any other questions. Anybody else? Okay, what, well, sure.
Sir, I just wanted to point out in the rendering that from the rear that y'all had brought up, there are 3 distinct areas of shade, the 3 porches
Yeah,
that are built into
I
the
think we
home.
determined that, yeah. Okay, Mr. Ripa?
Yeah, one other question. I mean, if I don't do this, then I guess one of the options is the umbrellas that we talked about, possibly. Do I have the ability just to grow a hedge there? I have a pitch apple hedge right there. Could I grow that pitch apple hedge 10 feet tall?
This really isn't,
Yeah, we're
I'm sorry,
getting-
sir, but this really isn't the place
To
to
ask that
ask.
question.
Yeah, the board is really just reviewing your application for a variance, and they can't really give you any advice on.
All right, well, I was just looking at what other options there were, so, and that's another option.
I'm sure the staff would be more than
Okay.
happy to discuss options with you.
All right, okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we've heard enough from everybody. Mr. Allison, you have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
I'll just mention a couple things. I was called a colleague, I believe, by one of the attorneys. I'm not an attorney. That's above my pay grade, but I try my best. I'm an urban planner. It's been indicated that enforcement of the zoning code is in the public interest. I agree. But we don't get to pick and choose what parts of the zoning ordinance are supportive of our particular view on one particular situation. Variances, design exceptions, things of that nature are as much a part of the zoning code as are setback requirements or building separation requirements. So if you find that we satisfy the criteria, that's fully consistent with the zoning code. The size of the home was quoted as 7,500 square feet by one of the neighbors. I don't know the specific number. Do you?
That includes all the garage on
But
AC space.
heated space?
Right, AC space.
Yeah, it's about 5,000 air conditions.
Yes.
I hear 5,000 air conditioned. I don't know, but
It's not 7,500 or 7,200, sorry.
okay, there was concerns that, and this was partially addressed by Carolina, that if the pergola was developed, that next thing you know, they're gonna come in and want to enclose it. There is no interest in ever enclosing that, and we would certainly accept a condition to that effect as well. Mr. Reba, I believe, has tried to be a good neighbor. I wasn't party to the discussions about the fence on the the eastern property line that was highlighted here. He could have a completely opaque fence there. He did not choose to do that, I think primarily for aesthetic reasons, but that would be a much more detrimental situation for the neighbor. He didn't want to do that and has no interest in doing that. He's trying to be as good a neighbor as possible. I don't think it's unreasonable that as much planning that goes into the construction of a home, that, as was indicated, once you get in there, you realize something else, something that you hadn't contemplated before. This pergola is exactly that sort of situation, which I think may constitute what we might call a unique circumstance. I think that's basically it. And again, I think that the solution proposed here is as much is perhaps the best solution for everyone involved. I think it's a better solution than things that would be available by code in terms of the umbrella and things of that nature. Unless you have further questions, I'll close.
Thank you very much. All right, I'll move to close the public hearing and without objection, and ask the board for a motion and/or discussion. Mr. Beal.
Well, at least for discussion purposes to start, we've heard tonight that there's a little bit of a difference between, we have hardships and we have practical difficulties, and unfortunately, I've really heard none or no evidence to support either one of those situations. I don't think that it's a unique situation. I mean, the home was constructed in its configuration by choice, omitting room for this as it's at least proposed. And I also I can see 3 outdoor areas that were already designed into the home to accommodate the wish to have an outdoor space behind the house, as we would all like to have. So given the criteria that we have to work with, and given the discussion that we've had, I would find it difficult to vote yes for this.
Ms. Hurtak, you have anything? Or Mr. Fellow?
Ms. Hurtak, please.
I'm going to add to that and say this seems a self-created hardship in addition to those things, so I'm going to agree with you, just bumping it up a notch.
Would you like to have anything to add, or have any questions for the board to ask? Or?
Well, I guess the only sort of item to the contrary that I see is that, if the applicant had to install or temporarily put up, an awning or a temporary, like a overhang, that seems like it would be a less desirable option. So, I mean, to that end, it seems like granting the variance would at least not harm the neighbor's properties as much as maybe a more temporary, overhang.
Mr. Fellow?
I will add to that, to Ms. Walker's point. Certainly in the past, we've tried to accommodate compromises or things that would work to both parties benefit. That's why I asked the question that I did. It seems that in this instance, the neighbors would prefer to sort of deal with that when it happens and if it happens. And, you know, we don't have real clear guidance as to what is legally permissible in that respect. So my thought is, given that I agree that we didn't see much in the way of hardship, particularly because of the other multiple outdoor spaces that provide the same or similar wants for this applicant, we would just sort of deal with that when it happens. Mr. Simpson.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd like to chime in on that too, because simply because what is allowed by code may be less desirable is not really a consideration for the board, other than, as you stated, in determining whether or not it's going to affect the nearby properties in that consideration. The applicant still has the burden of showing a hardship, and City Council determines what's desirable through the codes. So if the board thinks that the code is what's allowed by code is less desirable, it's really outside of the board's determination for that. The City Council has made the code, and that's what applies to everyone. The variance is there when the unique circumstances of the property do not fit that particular property, and so the hardship still needs to be proven, and whether or not what the code allows is less desirable is a consideration for whether or not it affects the neighborhood, but it doesn't relieve that burden of proving the hardship.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of what you just said. Sometimes there are unintended consequences of perception from one neighbor to another, perhaps. So a lot of times, for me personally, I'd like to ask the questions of what is legal versus what they're asking for, which obviously they're asking for a variance that isn't legal unless they come here to get it or go to City Council. For my own understanding, I try to get a handle on what is allowed by the code and compare that to what the testimony I'm hearing from a neighbor. And if the testimony in this case was the obstruction of a view, for instance, clearly what would legally be allowed would be, in my opinion, more of an obstruction of that view. And I just want everybody to understand that. Not trying to use it as a reason to give the variance, as the other attorney pointed out, and as you've also backed up. That's all I'm going to say about that. What I would like to say that nobody has said yet, I'm looking at the overall aerial in the package, and after hearing the testimony, and it didn't dawn on me initially, but the rear portion of the house they're trying to shade faces due north. It doesn't get a lot of direct sunlight, unless it's late in the summer months, is about the only time it would get direct sunlight. And to the west is the two-story part of the house that shades that angle. So I'm not even clear, and we're not going to open up the public hearing, but to me, there are very few hours of very few days that this rear glass wall would have direct sunlight. And it would be low-level light, which probably is why the architect didn't want to consider the 3-foot overhang above the doors, because it wouldn't shade low-level sunlight. And with all that in mind, if they were maxing out the footprint, why didn't they take that into consideration? Because they could have fixed that problem in the design before they built it. But, you know, it's got a 2-story structure immediately adjacent to the west, where most of that low-level light is coming from most of the year, and should be shading the glass. So I would agree with the other comments that I've heard tonight about self-imposed hardship, and would be open to a motion.
I can make that motion if we apparently choose to do so here. All right, I'd like to move the variance request for VRB 19-98 for property located at 198 Blanca Avenue in Tampa. Located at that property with an encroachment for eaves and gutters be denied due to the failure of the petitioner to meet its burden of proof to provide competent and substantial evidence in the record and at this public hearing of an unnecessary hardship or practical difficulty when considering the 5 hardship criteria set forth in section 27-80 of the Tampa City Code, specifically that this is a self-created hardship and that the home was recently designed and built without an allowance for an accessory structure in the proposed location, which would meet the current City of Tampa Code regarding building separation, according to Code Section 27-290, paragraph 1A3.
Mr. Chairman, I may have misheard, but I just want to confirm that you stated the address of the property in your motion.
Yes, 198 Blanca Avenue, Tampa.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion for denial by Mr. Villa. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Hurtak. Is there any more discussion? All in favor of denial? Aye. Any opposed? You were not approved, or the motion did not pass for approval. You were denied 5-0. You can appeal to City Council. You have 10 days to file that appeal. Next case is VRB 19-100 at 3603 South Omar Avenue.
Tawanda Anthony Land Development. This is case VRB 19-100. The property address is 3603 South Omar Avenue. The applicant is Aaron and Megan Rose. For section 27-284.2.5, the request is as follows. The applicant is seeking to remove a grand tree in the front yard. The applicant is seeking to construct a new single-family residence. The property is zoned RS75 and was purchased in 2019. The existing single-family residence was constructed in 1984. Natural Resources did find the request consistent with conditions. Here's the aerial of the property. Here's the subject's property, RS75 zoning and CG zoning. This is a view facing the front of the property. This is a view facing west and a view facing east. This is a conceptual plan, but here is the tree in question.
Could you slide that up a little bit? There you go. Thank you.
So here's the tree in question. It's within the front yard setback that's being requested for removal. And this hatch line here is the front setback. Are there any questions for staff? And Natural Resources is available.
I was going to say, Mr. Knox is going to talk, isn't he? He's staff.
Ryan Knox, Natural Resources. So Natural Resources conducted a tree consultation. It was TRC 19520. It was done in July 2019 to discuss the possibility of constructing a 2-story home around a 33-inch grand live oak. The live oak was rated B8 and is considered a grand tree. After meeting with the applicant, given that the applicant would like to build a 2-story home, with traditional setbacks of 25 in the front. The tree was in the building envelope. A two-story home without adjustments would require the removal of several large limbs. The large cuts would lead to effective removal of the tree, and to keep the tree, the applicant would have to construct a one-story residence to preserve the grand tree. If the board approves this variance, replacements based on canopy spread is required for the removal of the 33-inch grand tree with mitigation at 14 2.5-inch caliper trees. Here are some photos of the tree that's in the front. That is the applicant is requesting for removal. So second photo. And here are some more detailed photos of the limbs that overhang the one-story home. The first limb that's shown here was measured at approximately 14 feet in height, and there are several other limbs that overhang the one-story home that range from 14 feet to 18 feet. Here's a south to north view of those same limbs. This is the distance from the existing home to the grand tree. That's roughly about 12 feet. It's the back of the property. Natural Resources is available for questions.
Do you know if this is in the floodplain, this property?
It is, and so that was something that was brought to my attention as well. There will be, if I remember correctly, about 2 to 3 feet of fill on this property. And so given that, that is something else that Natural Resources considered when the variance was requested. So.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? We'll pass for now and come back to you later. Applicant, please come forward, state your name, address, and if you've been sworn, and let us know if the Rays are winning or losing.
There are 3-0. I was going to say that, but I didn't know if it was the right thing.
They are what?
I'm so nervous.
They are what?
They're winning 3-0 in the third.
Okay, I'm
Yes.
sorry. I digressed. I'm sorry.
Okay, hi.
I don't want to be admonished by legal.
Thank you for your time. My name is Aaron Rose. This is my wife, Megan Rose, and we're here representing our family on behalf of our 2 kids and our in-laws. Oh, address is 3603 South Omar Avenue, Tampa, Florida, 33629, and yes, we have been sworn in.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to prove that the alleged hardships or practical difficulties are unique and singular with respect to the property or with respect to a structure or building thereon, and are not those suffered in common with other property structures or buildings similarly located. Our practical difficulties is building a 2-story home. The grand oak that is located on our property presents a practical hardship to building a 2-story home. The canopy of the tree hangs over the buildable space by 22 feet. The tree is only 6 feet from the setback and is located in a central location. The current low-hanging limbs are approximately 13 to 14 feet high off the ground as it stands, which would actually, even a 1-story home, Brian and I've been working really close with Brian and Kathy Beck throughout this process. So, you know, even like a 1-story home once you have to go up to 11 feet with the new codes coming into play. Actually, they're going from 9 to 10, but our architect and builder says that you should go 12 inches above that just because FEMA changes things for future down the line. So it would be built 11 feet above, and it would make it hard even with a 1-story house because the limbs that would have to get cut off, they said that the tree would be deemed, you would have to remove it in order to build on the property.
Currently, the house is at around, or the lot is at around 7 feet, give or take where you are on the lot, above sea level. So to get to the 11 feet that is suggested, it would be an additional 4 feet. And then a 1-story structure, you know, with new code and reasonable structure, we have been told by our contractor, is 14 feet, so that would put a one-story structure at 18 feet. So those limbs, which are major limbs, would need to be removed. In the people that we're working with, opinion, just to build a one-story house, so.
So the current low-hanging limbs are approximately, yes, okay, 18 feet high. I think this is, like Kathy Beck and Brian told me, this is kind of a similar situation to one that you guys unanimously voted on. It was on Neptune. It was about a month or so ago.
It was in August.
August, similar VRB case. The licensed arborists that we used from Natural Resources were Mike Lucius, Kathy Beck, have informed us that there are multiple low-hanging large limbs that would need to be removed in order to build a two-story structure. Their assessment is that large cuts would lead to removal of the whole tree because of safety and damage of the tree. The tree would be unstable and would no longer be healthy and would then need to be removed because it would pose a danger. Reasonable configurations. These are, again, one-story configurations that we came up with.
You can see in those pictures, if you could put them back up.
Okay.
That the canopy of the tree, we're trying to avoid that canopy of the tree to preserve the tree. We would have to go very far back into the lot.
Okay, so different site, okay, reasonable reconfigurations. The cutout and the reconfiguration would affect the internal flow that we are trying to achieve that is keeping with the current development trends in this area. There's two-story structures. Every house being built in this area are two-story structures.
Around the same square footage is what we're trying to achieve.
Flood zone, I already went over the flood zone. It's important to build something that is keeping with the current size, style, and parameters of other new homes in the area to carve out space for the limbs of the tree and its trunks would not be possible to conform to the normal development pattern of this Belmar Shores and the greater South Tampa area. Failure to do so would result in a reduction in the use and value of the proposed building. Brian touched on the fill dirt, basically ruining the tree. Based on these practical hardships, we were asking to preemptively be allowed to remove the tree and its root system prior to starting. Unique and singular, the grand oak on our property is 6 feet from the front setback and the canopy is 22. It is also centrally located on the lot. We have every intention of replanting. We're gonna have to plant, I think 14 it was? 14 trees, so we love trees. We have every intention of replanting. We wish it was farther out. We would
It's a
certainly
beautiful
keep
tree.
it. We're not opposed to trees at all. So hopefully.
Well, and I wanted to add, as far as being unique and singular, the location of the tree on our lot, I believe, is unique and singular compared to several other properties in Belmar Shores that have been recently built that were able to preserve the tree. The trees are much farther from the setback, so the canopy doesn't overhang as much, the root system doesn't affect it as much, so those trees were able to be preserved. But the fact that our trees so close to the setback and in the middle of the lot presents a unique.
Here's 3 letters from neighbors in support of the tree removal. This is from a John McKnight. This is from James Thompson. And this is from a Christopher Hersum, who actually texted us on the way here and said, "Good luck, guys." So there's 3 letters in support.
And we have pictures and addresses of the homes that were newly built that were able to preserve the tree that show how much further out they are, if you would like to see them.
Yeah, sure. Do you want to submit those letters, or do they?
Oh, the
they just-
letters,
okay.
yes. Oh, he's got them, okay, great.
Oh, front and back.
Yes, he asked.
He said submit the letters.
Hang on.
Just
see this.
3603.
She just asked for it.
3603. They're all 3603. Oh, no, that's the address.
If you want to.
Yep,
Yeah,
so
keep
you
going. I
wanted
didn't
to
mean to
see
stop
the pictures, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is 3421 South Gardenia. The trees are more centrally located between the street and the existing structure, or the new structure that was built. This is under construction as we speak. It's 3403 South Gardenia. The street is approximately here. I mean, it's a huge tree and it's closer, so it's just way closer to the street. And the last picture is,
You already showed that one.
yes, is 3602 South Omar. Again, it is closer to the edge of the street, not as encroaching upon the structure.
Yeah, so we plan on doing something similar to this. So we do plan on putting oaks back.
Yeah, we would like to put our, like, if the approval is granted, we want to put trees in more functional positions, but we do want to, you know, add trees back into the neighborhood because we love, you know, we love the neighborhood and we think we love the trees, we love the canopy, it's beautiful, so.
We've got a few more minutes. Anything else you want to say?
I think that's,
I think we covered why it's a hardship and a practical difficulty.
Okay. Questions? Do you have questions? I got one question for Mr. Knox.
Go right ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. Somebody said, I think we heard from Miss Anthony, the home that was there now was built in 1984? Is that correct? And the reason I'm asking, is the tree about 35 years old?
It's probably older than 35 years old.
Any idea, or?
It's probably somewhere in the.
Got to cut it down to figure it out? No.
Yeah, no, or you could just do a core sample.
I mean.
That's the less invasive option.
Yeah, right. But I mean, trees grow at about an inch.
Yeah, they grow
about an inch a year, right?
Yeah, they grow about an inch a year, sometimes a half inch, depending on what the
Right.
event is.
And this one was 30 inches, I think?
It's
No, 33.
33.
33,
So,
okay. I was just wondering if it was about 35 years old. Okay.
I'd say so.
And this particular, hang on, got one more. This particular tree, based on its condition, its B8 rating, minimum setback, if a new structure is built, if they kept the tree, what are you going to be looking for a minimum setback?
Well, we could start with the existing setbacks. So like if they built the house where the existing foundation is located, we would accept that, given that there's an understanding that the roots are likely deflected.
Okay.
And so if there's a deflection, then we would allow that to happen. We've done it on other properties, and I think we had a case here recently where we accepted that as a part of the variance.
And in this case, it's about 6 feet.
Yes, it's about 6 feet.
I thought you said 12.
I think, if I remember correctly, I had a measurement of 12, and I think the 12 was for a different property, but I think this one is actually 6. I apologize.
Well,
about that.
based
I
on the
was
survey,
incorrect.
it looks to be around 6.
Yeah.
Okay.
Based on the survey. Okay.
But then wouldn't the limbs overhanging are 14 to 18 feet? So assuming that it's corrected, we're putting another 4 feet of dirt there. So even with, regardless of the setback or the house from the tree, there's still going to be a problem with the roof.
Yeah, there will be some issues with the roof. You would probably have to take off 3 or 4 of those limbs that we were looking at in the photos. You would have some upper canopy left, but for what they're proposing as a 2-story option, it becomes extremely limited on the options of trying to preserve the tree.
Yeah, it looks, according to the survey, the existing grade around the existing home is around 6 feet. And if FEMA's going to require 11, that's a 5-foot increase to the slab. And then I think I heard testimony 14 to 18 feet from grade to the lowest limb?
Yeah, it's for the lowest limit is 14. It's
14.
actually 13.9 to
Okay.
be exact.
So the point being that if you're going up 5,
Yeah.
you've only got 9.5 feet, which is kind of a normal height in a room plus a roof, even if it were 1 story. That's
Correct.
what the concern is.
Yeah, and before I bought this place, I went to Kathy Beck and I said, Kathy, I'm not some big money guy. I'm like, if I can't, if we can't build a 2-story structure here, then I don't want to buy this place. And she showed me the limb that's low. She's like, once you cut that, the tree's gone. You have to remove it. She's like,
Cutting it where? Did she say where that cut? I mean, was she inferring the 25-foot setback or some other place behind the 25-foot setback?
I think she was referencing the 25-foot setback.
Okay.
And with that, you would have to make a heading cut that would be pretty significant. So
Okay.
you wouldn't be reducing back to a lateral per se. You would just make a blunt cut.
Okay.
At that point, hope for sprouting, and at that point, you're doing sprout management.
Which means the new structure would have to be built further away to allow the sprouts to happen, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
It probably, yeah. you would
Otherwise,
have to
you're
go
cutting it
further back.
forever.
Yeah, you'd be cutting it back forever or trying to elevate.
Right.
And it'll be a process that would go on for years. And combine that on top of the additional fill that you would put it in the tree, and you would essentially have a tree well at that point.
Oh, okay.
And so with that, you would have to provide drainage for that, which typically has been ineffective over the years because it requires a lot of maintenance as well.
Well, plus if it's in a floodplain, I don't know if these streets flood or not, but I mean, that would be a challenge to have a well if that's the issue with the floodplain.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes.
Ms. Hurtak.
What about changing the back setbacks? It looks like you have a pool in every design. Is there a way you could get rid of the pool, move the house back, maybe have it not as big?
I mean, we have the alternative site plans that show that. Or actually, I guess they have the pool on there. The pool is right up on the setback.
But my question.
So if we were to move it back, I mean, I think you're still pretty close to the canopy. I mean,
With the 2-story structure that we gave them as our design, it would take you past the setback.
Which is fine. My question is how far past the setback?
Like it takes you into the neighbor's yard.
yeah, we have
So-
an alternative design that was presented.
To them, yeah.
To
We
them.
just
I
brought
don't
the
know
one
where
story because we thought that that's the only option
To get the size structure that we want, the
What
first
size-
floor,
what size is
it's
that?
around 3,500 square feet.
3,500
3,600
under roof,
Yes, air conditioned.
air conditioned.
Which is in keeping with, the other structures that are being built around Belmar Shores and South Tampa on similar sized lots. It does encroach back behind that setback.
Yeah,
The
I
only
mean-
way to not encroach behind that setback was to build a smaller.
Plus, we have young
structure.
kids. I mean, we would like a backyard.
But you could fence the front yard. I mean, I'm just saying that are there options?
Well-
It looks like there are options that you have not considered.
I do think that, I mean, we did consider that because I've heard of like people putting pools in the front yard, et cetera. I think that falls under the reasonable use of the property in keeping with the structures that are being built, and that it would affect our, hold on. Let me gather my thoughts. Wait, just let me gather my
So
thoughts.
that is an option.
Well, give me 1 second.
It's a 1-story
Give me
option.
1 second.
And
There is a criteria that you guys use that says something to the effect of it, like if the value is affected, of the structure, that, you know, you can't encroach upon the value of the structure and in keeping with the structures that are, you know, to be built. And that would greatly affect the value of the structure and the overall keeping with the look and feel and size of the homes that are being built in Belmont Shores and in South Tampa. So I don't think it's a practical reconfiguration.
Can you, speaking of the value, can you speak to that? I mean, because your husband made a comment earlier that that you were having discussions with Kathy Beck prior to buying the home site, the lot. And so there was a price for what you paid that you justified, apparently, because you bought it, right? I mean, you own it. So that value you justified based on the ability to take the tree out.
To build a two-story structure,
To
correct.
build
keep
a
up with
two-story strury which causes the tree to come out.
Correct, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Because it says here
And
that.
if someone said, well, we may not be able to take the tree out, we can't promise that, would you have bought the lot? Or would you have paid less for the lot value-wise? Is
Yes.
Is that what you're trying to say,
Yes,
I guess?
yes, we would not have purchased the lot if we were not able to remove, like, they had not kind of
So I think.
given us
Well,
the guarantee that.
nobody promised you
There's no
that you could
guarantee,
take
but,
nobody
but kind of
promised
just,
us.
nobody promised us.
She just
but-
told us how the law was stated and that this should fall under that, like, because a reasonable configuration is a one-story home and those are our alternate designs or what the reasonable configuration looks like this right here, but our intended use is for a two-story home.
Okay.
And not only that, like, whatever the, I don't know if it's A, B, C, D, or E, but one of the standards that you guys use for your criteria is that, you know, you can't infringe upon basically the reducing the value of the home. And I can pretty much guarantee that I'm not an expert, I'm not a real estate expert, but I know that I would not purchase a home. I would value a home less that had a pool in the front and a front yard in the front, like a fenced-in front yard in the front, versus what is in keeping with the, you know, homes that are being built today.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
can I clarify a few things? I did hand your husband a list of the code factors that the board considers in making these decisions, and reducing the cost is not a factor. However, the under E, the cost of utilizing an alternative construction method and the reduction in use and the value are criteria for consideration for the board. And then the other thing to add to that, to clarify, as I indicated earlier tonight, there is a definition to reasonable reconfiguration. And as I was trying to say earlier, City Council has limited how we can reasonably reconfigure, or what we can tell applicants is reasonable in reconfiguring. And if you look at the second criteria there, it says there is no change in the number of stories proposed and the height of the structure is increased no more than allowed. So reasonable reconfiguration doesn't include changing the amount of stories. So if they're proposing a two-story, then it would not be reasonable reconfiguration for the board to suggest that they do a one-story instead.
Okay. Did I skip over asking anybody in the audience if they wanted to speak? I think
You can ask again if you like.
Because there's one person in the audience. Pardon?
Find out who I am in a minute.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. All right. Well, I guess we're done with questions, right? So you have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Wait, does she want to speak?
Well, we'll just clarify
Oh, no.
for the record that the lady in the back is city staff.
Right.
And that there were no public comment.
Right, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we went and took our bikes and our kids, and last Sunday, I even wrote a letter to the neighbors, and we went and we hung out on the streets, and everybody seemed really nice about it, and everybody welcomed us to the neighborhood, and I hope that you guys will approve this for us, please.
Okay, without further objection, I'm going to close the public hearing and move for a board motion and/or discussion.
I hate taking down trees, but when they are legally required to be taken down by the criteria that's been passed by the city, I am obligated to follow those procedures. And in this case, it seems that this is one of those instances. And appreciate that the applicant said that they're not opposed to trees. I thought that was funny.
If it was closer to the road,
No, it's I
You get to listen.
appreciate it. It's, look, I get it, I understand what y'all were saying. And frankly, trees, they provide a great value to homes, and I'm sure it's gonna be to your advantage to plant more trees just further away from where you're gonna build. Look, I don't see any way that we can, given the way this tree spreads, and given its positioning, and given the criteria that's before us, I don't see any way to avoid saying this has to be approved, in my opinion.
Anybody else have any comments? Or I
don't agree, but.
Well, that's okay. We're allowed to not agree.
Please, speak your mind.
No, I just think that there's definitely alternate methods that they could use to even have a 1 and a 2-story house, like the 2-story in the back. I mean, there's other things that you could do on this lot, and I'd be happy if they were here to ask for a setback to go even further back. I would totally be okay with that. But just looking at this, I don't see that they've exhausted every possibility, and that's what I'm not liking about that. So that's just me.
One little tidbit that I would add to that is, or to that frame of thinking, is that, there was a quick discussion about having a pool in the front yard. Well, I don't really see that as an option because of the root spread of the tree, unless somebody has a
Anthony Land
different
Development, I did
opinion on
want to
that.
quickly state that pools are not allowed in the front yard.
Yeah, all right.
So
Without
that's
coming
not-
before
By code,
us.
they're not allowed.
Right, all right.
So that's not an option.
Yeah, no, it is an option. They'd have to come before the board to get it.
But I don't have a pool. You don't have to have a pool.
That's true.
That's my
That is
point.
true. That is true.
Well, then it's a value question.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I under our old tree rules, I would be arguing in the same way that you are now, because under our old tree rules, as I understood them, everything that you said was accurate, and I would have probably said the same exact thing. Look, there are other ways to configure this. You don't have to have a pool. You don't have to have those things. Under the new rules and the way I read these new rules as applying here, and we are absolutely permitted to disagree, and I think there's great value when we have discussions and when we disagree.
Well, we're also going to learn the new code by having this.
Hopefully we are. As I interpret this code, and as I read it, and given the facts before us, I am challenged to, and I didn't want to ask this now from legal. I figured I'd wait until later. Certainly, when you say things like there's no change in the number of stories, there have to be limits to that, right? I mean, if someone's coming before us and saying, well, I can fit a 3-story house on here, and a tree would survive with a 2-story house, I mean, where do we draw that line? But I'm reading these rules, and I'm reading the way they're applying and how legal is interpreted for them, those rules for us, and I don't see how we preserve this tree given that. And unfortunately, I think that the tree probably needs to go, and that some new trees can come in. I think that the fill aspect of this has to be considered as well, because if they're going to have to put a few feet of dirt on there, Natural Resources has told us about that well issue, and I don't know quite how that works, but it doesn't sound like it works well. So
wells aren't well.
Yeah, they don't work well. So I mean, I get it.
And I mean, just again, for argument's sake, and I'm new at this, so if you were just to renovate that house, would you still have to go up those 5 feet?
Depending on the value the amount you were increasing the cost. If you're over 50%, FEMA requires you bring the entire structure up to code, which would mean raising it up.
Okay, that's good to know.
Ms. Walker?
I have a question for legal. So with the new tree criteria, we should use this in lieu of the 5 hardship criteria.
Yeah, hardship is not tree removal.
Correct. This is, the tree removal factors are different. That's why you have a separate motion language that I presented. I think it's still maybe relevant to consider the hardship, but the factors are listed in the term hardship is not used in the factors that are stated there.
So self-creation does not fall
No.
within these.
Well, it does, but not in the sense of hardship cases.
Right. If you look at all the factors there, they all seem to be directed to the structure and what's being proposed and whether or not if it can be if the I'm sorry. So if the first one is the impact of the structure on the tree, the second one is whether or not the structure can be reasonably reconfigured, which we've talked about a little bit, and there's a separate definition that I've given you that kind of puts some contours to what reasonable reconfiguration is. The third one is whether or not setbacks can be adjusted. Then the next one is alternative construction methods that might be able to preserve the tree. The next is a cost consideration, and that's both the cost of the alternative constructions and whether or not that might reduce the use or the value of the structure compared to the condition of the tree. And then the last one is applicable only to accessory buildings, and it talks about considering the pattern of the neighborhood and what kind of accessory buildings are in that neighborhood.
So, Mr. Simpson, the last part of paragraph B under factors, am I to interpret that if staff says something to the effect that we're okay with this tree coming out because of the issues that they've looked at, is that saying that we should consider the recommendation by Natural Resources Coordinator? Are they in terms of removal versus non-removal, or just the other factors?
Well, I think it's always okay for the board to consider the recommendations of staff. My interpretation of that phrase is that staff could come forward with suggestions of stating what possible reasonable reconfigurations do exist, and that this board could consider that. So if staff came forward and said, well, they could flip the house around and accommodate the tree, the board could consider that as part of its analysis of whether or not reasonable reconfiguration was possible.
Okay, all right.
But last
word.
Yeah, sorry, last word. I'm going to go back to Commissioner Feldman's point of this no change.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, not Commissioner, board member. My apologies. About people coming with like 3 stories and covering the whole property. I mean, that's basically, we're just going to have to take every single tree out.
There've got to be limits. I don't know what they are.
Yeah,
There've got to be limits.
there has to be, because
But 1 and 2.
That's a huge. Anyway, okay, thank you.
Okay, well, I'll sum up as quickly as I can my thoughts here. Again, because of the floodplain issue, because of the height of the existing major limbs that are growing on the building side of the lot, and the proximity of the tree being more or less centered, yes, I could see a potential for alternative design, especially after hearing the testimony from Mr. Knox that they might have been willing to go up to 6 or 7 feet away from the tree. And then considering, you know, and again, design isn't just horizontal, it's vertical. That could you then design a two-story or 1/2-story structure that preserved the tree? And we didn't see enough alternative design that went hard to that question. I agree with that. And no, you're not entitled to have a pool. But you know, given the aspects of the floodplain specifically, for me, I just think that trees grow fast. I mean, 35 years is a long time. I don't want to minimize that. It's not 100 years. It's not 50 years. Mr. Knox said that this is probably older than 35 years. It might be 40. Who knows? But the point is that if homeowners plant trees 30 or 40 years from now, there'll be 2 of these, not just one, with whatever the alternative design was. So again, mainly because of the floodplain, I could approve this removal under the new guidelines. Anybody else? If not, somebody please make a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Yes. Okay. Newbie.
I move that variance request for case VRB 19-100 for property located at 3603 South Omar Avenue be granted as depicted on the site plan presented at the public hearing for removal of a grand tree based upon the petitioner meeting the burden of proof with regard to the 6 factors for determining tree removal as set forth in section 27-284.5.2.5, subsection F4 of the city code for granting tree removal, specifically that the evidence provided in the record shows that there are few reasonable alternative design configurations. The tree is located towards the center of the yard, and the property is located in a floodplain.
Okay. We have a motion for removal by Ms. Walker. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Feldman, second. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, you are approved 4-1.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Go Rays.
Go
All right.
ahead.
Thank you. Hey, buddy, thank you, man.
I just want to tell everybody, staff included, that, you know, to get our arms around this new code is going to take a few meetings. And so we do appreciate any and all advice, help you can give us. These handouts were amazing, so thank you very much. Yeah.
If you could hit that, and I mean, I do want to know where the lines are drawn, because when you talk about, we can't ask them to reasonably, we can't do more than reasonable configuration, and if one of the criteria is